Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this virtual technical meeting. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alvaro Calle. I'm the section's DC area director. So thank you for being here in this month's transportation virtual technical meeting. We've got some presentations here from the Virginia Tech Arlington campus Urban Planning Affairs Department, and so we're excited to have them here and share some of the great projects and research that they've been doing here in our local area. So I just want to give quick thanks to our sponsors at the moment you see on the slides. We're still seeking sponsorship, so these are just the current ones confirmed so far. Just so thank you to these firms and organizations for your continued sponsorship as well. Just a little bit of housekeeping as well regarding this meeting. We're going to record this meeting, as you probably noticed when you joined. So we'll be posting this in our YouTube page maybe a month or two from now, just for your access as well. You can, oops, sorry about that. You can also, check out our LinkedIn page and YouTube, like I mentioned, the YouTube page for more kind of updates regarding our section as well. After each presentation, we'll do a Q&A session, and then as well as near the very end, maybe days from now, we'll send out the one PDH related to this meeting. Great. So with that, I'll pass it over. I'll stop sharing and I'll pass it over to Vinay.
Thanks, Alvaro, and welcome everybody to today's CAPSITE Transportation Planning Virtual Technical Meeting. Today we have two presenters presenting a total of 3 topics today, and our first speaker is Jason Schwartz of the US DOT's Federal Railroad Administration. Jason is a class of 2023 Presidential Management Fellow with a placement in the US DOT's Federal Railroad Administration. He works in the Office of Railroad Planning and Engineering, where he provides technical assistance and oversight for projects in the corridor identification and development and rail crossing elimination programs. He previously worked 6 years in manufacturing engineering and warehouse operations at Cummins and General Electric. He received a master's in urban and regional planning and has a BS in mechanical engineering from Virginia Tech. And his presentation today will be a review of bicycling in Falls Church. And I'm just going to quickly go through the abstract for Jason as he gets ready for his presentation. In an effort to gain more understanding of the issues and gain more support for biking in Falls Church, the Virginia Tech Fall 2022 Master of Urban and Regional Planning Studio class was charged with a review of the past Falls Church Bicycle Master Plan. This review includes an analysis of the current plan, an audit of current conditions for bicycling in the city, a public survey and outreach, a literature review of other bicycle master plans nationwide, and an analysis of potential routes for a short-term implementation. And without further ado, I will give it to Jason to start his presentation. Jason?
All right, thank you, Alvaro and Vinay. My name is Jason Schwartz, and I'm going to be presenting on the planning studio project that I worked on for one of my graduate classes with Professor Buehler. And in this project, we did 7 key deliverables for the City of Falls Church to support bicycling infrastructure. I'm just going to talk about 3 of our deliverables that we did. The first is a current conditions analysis. The second is the community outreach that we did. And the last thing I'm going to talk about was the team that I was on, which is the cycling route analysis and recommendation. So before I begin, has anyone cycled in Falls Church? Feel free to drop in the chat. I'm curious to know, have you been on WNOD trail? Like, what's your experience biking? Is it good? Is it bad? Just curious to see what if anyone's been there. Great, good. Yes, it's quite exciting, and this initiative that we did is really to support Falls Church and their advancing their planning principles as they are densifying their city and moving towards a more suburban style development to more urban, and it's quite impressive what they're doing now in Falls Church. So to start the presentation, I'll first talk about the current roadway conditions analysis. So what our team did is we worked on both a quantitative analysis and qualitative analysis. So for the quantitative analysis, we looked at the People for Bikes network analysis tool, which produces streets in the low, moderate, or high level. And we also did a qualitative analysis where we actually rode our bikes through the city and evaluated the streets based on our perceived level of comfort. And again, this process was towards trying to see, okay, what are our current conditions to understand the baseline levels of where things are at. And we really found that the main streets, Broad and Washington, are of course the expert level, and the streets surrounding in the different quadrants were the lowest level of stress. The next piece I'm going to talk about is the community outreach. So we did fairly extensive community outreach where we had a survey, and we went out to the farmers market and also sent the survey out via the staff at Falls Church to send out to the different neighborhood groups. And we found our surveys really match up with literature that supports cycling, and we found that that in general the male respondents were more comfortable than the women, and the male respondents also cycled more frequently. And we also found that this was definitely a big concern we were looking at, is how were different groups feeling comfortable on the roadways, so we could help best design and come up with a network that was suitable for everyone. And the biggest concerns that we found, which is that most people were concerned about their safety. And the city of Falls Church does not really have, besides the WNOD trail, any dedicated cycling rights of way. So we really took this into consideration when we were looking to provide our recommendations to the city. We are also very interested in seeing the locations of interest where people were looking towards actually cycling. And as you can see on this slide, the downtown Falls Church is definitely a really big location of interest, as well as to and from the WNOD trail, which generates quite a lot of ridership, especially on the weekends. Also, the Metro was very popular. And then further down, we have school and the Eden Center. And cycling to school and the Eden Center is a lower levels of interest in general, because there's not really as many good routes to get to those locations. So as we were, next I'm going to talk about the routes recommendation, and this is kind of our core focus that I worked on with the team, is to, okay, how can we deliver a conceptual level route network and showcase to the city, okay, what's possible. And our framework, purpose and need, what we're really looking to do is, what is something that is implementable within a short time frame, a 2-year time frame, and something that would not be too capital intensive. So that was, I guess, our purpose. And then our really need is to really catch up to the level of development that's taking place in the city, and really get people outside of cars, so that people could travel within and through the city. So we had a 3-step screening methodology in which we developed our route network, really taking in a lot of various inputs and synthesizing them together in an iterative process and a holistic process. So it's very difficult with the size of the city and overall level of not too much cycling to really do a strict quantitative study of determining the best routes for investment. So we really just combined all of these different inputs. And we created 3 different outputs. The first is the roadway conditions analysis, which I had a slide on earlier. And then what we did with that is we took in some of the best practices and the CACT memo, which is the Citizens Advisory Group on cycling, as well as the City of Falls Church, the staff level feedback that we got, put it together to come up with our routes. And each of those routes, we had designated a low and high level of investment. And then once we had our routes, we decided to put our routes together to form our network. And we used, again, feedback from the City of Falls Church, the CAC memo, and the public outreach, which I presented on earlier, to kind of come up with our route networks. And we came up with 4 different networks: so low, medium, high, and max, which I will talk about. So this slide showcases our individual routes that we came up with, and each of them has a low level of investment and a high level of investment. And in general, they're the investment level is pretty low. It's kind of like the minimum that we thought would actually make a substantive difference in the level of cycling. And then a max level is kind of the high end of the capital range that we'd be looking at. And we used Maryland DOT has a cost estimating worksheet that does conceptual level cost estimates based off of certain characteristics and features that we are looking to do. So this is an example of one of the routes that connects to the school. And we have this in the full report, which I'm not sure if and I can link in the chat. But for each of our different routes, we really propose, okay, what are our different intersection treatments? What types of infrastructure are we going to be putting in? And just kind of the overview of what's needed to get to create the low and high level of routes that we are going to do. And so next, here is our kind of summary based on the route network. So we took each route, and then we either did the low or the high, or in some cases, nothing, and created our 4 different networks of investment. And the range goes from a really bare bones $300,000 of capital investment up to $4 million. And these numbers for the City of Falls Church would definitely be a substantial investment in cycle infrastructure. So just for example, the 6-year plan that the City of Falls Church has for their overall transportation network is about $93 million. So investing up to $4 million would be not a huge amount, but still a substantive amount. This is not like a Paris investing 300 million or some figure at that level, but still quite a lot. Next is these are descriptive summaries of the different treatments and infrastructures that we'd be applying to each of the different route networks and each individual route. So on the left, you have the kind of bare bones, where you have some streets with no change at all. Then on the right, you have our max level of treatment that we thought would significantly impact the network and generate ridership. And our overall recommendation was to go for the max route network, because that would best align with the city's welcoming and inclusive vision. But we do gave a short-term recommendation that the high route network could be a good start as well if they didn't have the funds necessary. And again, overall, our presentation, and this is covered in the full document, we really just provided information to help level up Falls Church to really match neighboring jurisdictions such as Arlington and Alexandria, because the level of development of Falls Church is really approaching what's seen in neighboring jurisdictions. And we gave a comprehensive set of recommendations to how they can really go forward and advance cycling. And I think it was a really great project. And really the biggest takeaway from working on this is the importance of working with all the stakeholders and, in our case, the City of Falls Church, and make sure to understand exactly what is the purpose and need, what are we trying to deliver, and being able to find the appropriate ranges of solutions that meet that. So currently, the City of Falls Church is going through a process where they are actively updating their bicycle master plan. And I'm not sure if Vinay can drop a link to that as well in the chat, where they will, by the summer, hopefully the city council will vote on their plan and be able to actually roll out some of these recommendations that we are putting forward. So with that, I will unshare my screen, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask any questions.
Just monitoring the chat. If there are any questions? The links have been posted here in the chat for the studio report and then the City of Falls Church Bicycle Master Plan update. I guess I have a question for you, Jason, in that how receptive was the City of Falls Church with the recommendations that were proposed by your students?
Yeah, so we presented to the Planning Commission, and overall, the feedback was mostly, they were looking to see perhaps more aggressive recommendations in terms of actual dedicated cycling rights of way and other sorts of treatments. But we did frame again that based on our established purpose and need, we're doing more of a short-term implementation, which I think would be a great first step. And we do provide examples of other localities such as Cambridge and specific streets where they have done incremental improvements from nothing to shared streets to dedicated infrastructure. So we do lay that out in the report, but overall, I think it was a very positive reception, and I think there's definitely some eagerness, and we'll see how the political situation is and what these conversations that take place now into the summer with the city council review, as well as the public, as to what level of infrastructure investment they really want to make.
It's fantastic, and that's got to be an amazing experience for your students. Dan Hardy also has a question in the chat. Jason, I like the range of costs and facilities. I may have missed this, but did you look at the level of traffic stress improvements with the different networks?
Yes, we did. So we did not do a post analysis of what they would be if we had implemented all these levels. But they definitely would make an improvement, at least not on the quantitative, like people for bikes, because most of the streets that were deemed as moderate were the streets that we had proposed no investment. So it wouldn't necessarily show up on level of traffic stress, any quantitative metrics, but so the qualitative metrics, and perhaps if we had actually done measured car speeds and vehicle speeds, that would show up. But that would definitely be something that would need to be measured in an implementation plan.
Are there any other questions for Jason? All right, thank you so much, Jason. Really appreciate you sharing your information with your students.
Thank you.
And then up next is also from Virginia Tech. I hope I'm getting that right. Yes, is Professor Ralph Buehler. Ralph Buehler is a professor of urban affairs and planning in the School of Public International Affairs at Virginia Tech's Research Center in Arlington. Most of his research has an international comparative perspective, contrasting transport and land use policies, transport systems, and travel behavior in Western Europe and North America. In addition to over 80 articles in referred academic journals, Ralph is also the author or co-author of chapters in edited books, reports to federal and local governments, non-government organizations, and for-profit industry organizations, and the edited books City Cycling and Cycling for Sustainable Cities. Between 2012 and 2018, Professor Buehler served as chair of the Committee for Bicycle Transportation of the Transportation Research Board. And between 2019 and 2023, Professor Buehler chaired the All right, and Professor Buehler has two presentations, and the first presentation will be focused on pedestrians and e-scooters, an initial look at e-scooter parking and perceptions by riders and non-riders. And
Okay,
Ralph, it's all yours.
thank you for the introduction. So what I've done is I've combined my presentations, and I'll just do them in one, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Thanks everyone for attending and for your time. And what I'm presenting on today, and I'm sharing my screen right now, is titled Research at the Cutting Edge, Learning from Student Projects at Virginia Tech. And so the idea is to highlight or to feature projects that we have done with students, and where students were sort of in the driving seat of research that sort of provided insights for research, but also for local governments. Jason already alluded to these studio classes. So studio classes are typically a group of students who is asked by an outside entity, a client, like it may be the City of Falls Church, it may be a company, it may be a business improvement district, to solve a certain problem or do research around a certain practical problem. The same can happen with capstone projects where individual students work with an outside client on these on a specific topic they're interested in. They're cool, these projects, because they're sort of in quick response time, and we'll see a couple of examples that I'll give. These sort of cutting edge things. We have small teams or just one student, and typically students are very, very motivated. The QR code there is just a link to our general Masters of Urban and Regional Planning program. So these are all masters students on these projects. And we see a picture there of some of the students. I've done several of these studio classes that I mentioned before, and the ones in yellow here are the ones that I'm highlighting today. One on bike sharing in DC, where we were sort of the first to actually look at Capital Bikeshare, really just after it had launched. And then one from 2019 on e-scooters and in Roslyn, and also e-scooters and other roadway users. But you also see we did projects of the economic impact of Capital Bikeshare. We looked at cycling in the Foggy Bottom area, bike sharing in Merrifield, dockless bike share in DC when that sort of emerged, e-scooters at Virginia Tech's campus in Blacksburg, and more recently then also the cyclist and pedestrian counters on the National Park Service in the DC area, and cycling in the City of Falls Church. The QR code there is exactly this website, and then you can actually use the links and see the final reports of those. Before I start, though, I wanted to feature one project that a single student had done, who is now a very accomplished professional by the name of John Wergen. And his project was around, where do bike share bikes actually go? And what we had at the time for that were 100 Capital Bikeshare bikes that were equipped with GPS trackers. And that was before we only knew the drop-off and the pickup locations of Capital Bikeshare bikes, but we didn't know about the routes. And so John was able, and I'm going to start this video here, to use the trackers to figure out where these bikes go. And you see the cabbie stations there with the red dots, and then you see these blue and red dots moving through the slide here. And the red dots are regular cabbie members who have an annual membership. And the blue ones are the daily members who only swipe their credit card and ride cabbie for a day. And the video here is running by time of day. So this is 6 a.m. in the morning, and that's why we have relatively few cabbie bikes out there. And you see as the time progresses, how more and more cabbie bikes are riding through the system. And this was at a time sort of the first look at where cabbie bikes actually ride to and where they go to. So DDOT had collected the data, but they had asked us to clean it and then to analyze it. And now it's 7 a.m. in the morning, and you see how the activity is really picking up. We don't have enough time to watch the whole video. It's actually quite soothing to watch it. If you follow the QR link there, I think you get to the paper that John and I did, but I can also provide you with a link to that video. It's on YouTube, and I embedded it here. So this is 8 a.m. You see more of the casual users in blue also showing up. So you can see the activity in the cabbie network. It's 5 minutes long. I won't play it all, but you get the sense of how it works. Also, based on this data, then we could sort of create look at the activity of the bike share users. On top there you see the casual members. So those who only pay for 1 day to ride Capital Bikeshare. And you see that the usage there, the really deep purple colors, is really concentrated around the National Mall. On the other hand, on the right now here, you see the usage pattern of the Capital Bikeshare members who have annual memberships or other longer term memberships. And their usage is not around the National Mall mainly, but it's more in the city, or it's in the district. And we were able to see that based on the traces we had. We're also able to compare the two groups, the casual users and the members. And as you can see here, the casual users ride for much longer time than the members. Members only ride for about 13 minutes a piece. The casual users ride for 40 minutes at a piece. Also, the casual members ride at a slower speed, but also then slightly larger distances. We could also use that data to then see where they actually ride and use the GPS traces and match them to the roadway and infrastructure network in DC. And the darker the red color there is, you see these are the links that the Capital Bikeshare users are actually using. We then combine that with the available bikeway infrastructure at the time. I think this was 2016 or 2017 when we did that. And we could then calculate the share of mileage that the Capital Bikeshare users are riding on bikeway infrastructure, on parkland, or on roadways. And we see that the annual members ride a higher share on actual infrastructure and on roadways, while the casual members ride a lot in parkland. And this is national park land around the national mall. Related to this, the one study I wanted to highlight here is a study from 2011, right when Capital Bikeshare had launched. And our question was, are the Capital Bikeshare users actually different from regular cyclists in the DC area? And you see a picture of all the students involved there. You may recognize some of them who you now know in their professional roles. But it was a great group of students who did this project. And the main motivation was that little was known about Capital Bikeshare users, and especially the short-term bikeshare users who are not even members. You can't reach them in a survey. They only swipe a credit card and then they ride it. And so the goal for the students then was to compare regular riders based on a regional household travel survey with Capital Bikeshare members based on a member survey, and a survey the students designed, an intercept survey, and we'll see pictures of that in a second, where students went out and interviewed short-term Capital Bikeshare users as they dropped off or picked up their bikes to find out who they are. This is the students sort of in action out there. We identified the stations with the most casual, that's how we dubbed them, the most casual users. And then they were out there and interviewing them to find out who they are. And in the following, I'll show a couple of results. This is by gender, male, female. In brown, we have the area cyclists, which are about 2/3 men. In gray, we have the Capital Bikeshare members, 55% men, and then the short-term users, only 48% men. So the short-term users are somewhat different from the Capital Bikeshare members, and they're quite different from the area cyclists. This is the same comparison here by age. We see that here among the youngest group, it's the short-term members have the highest share in that. The 25 to 34-year-old had the highest share for the annual members. And then as people get older over here, that's where the area cyclists sort of dominate. So the area cyclists are older than the Capital Bikeshare users on average. This is by income. We don't have that for short-term users because turns out if you hang out at the bike share station and ask people to tell you their income, they don't. They're not comfortable doing that. But what we see here is that the bike sharing annual members have lower incomes than the area cyclists. So we are reaching a different demographic with Capital Bikeshare than the general area cyclist. This is car ownership. Simple question, do you have a car or do you not have a car in your household? Again, the area cyclists are much more likely to have a car in their household, while Capital Bikeshare members, only 50% say they have a car in their household. And then the last of these graphs, this is about the trip purpose. So when you ask people, why are you riding? And we see for the work on the left, about 43% of the Capital Bikeshare members say they use Cabby for work. A third of the area cyclists say they ride for work. Only 2% of the short-term Cabby users say they are on a business trip or for work. You see then the big difference is the Capital Bikeshare short-term users, 53% are tourists. They're in the city and they ride Capital Bikeshare. And that sort of fits with what we saw with John Wergen's map there, with the main activity of the short-term users being around the mall. So in summary, compared to area cyclists, bike-share users are more likely women. They're younger, they have lower household income, they're not owning a car, and they take more work and personal trips. Compared to annual members, the short-term users are more likely women, older, they're replacing walking trips, and they are tourists, or they're using the Cabby for tourism. There's a lot of potential for bike sharing to introduce bicycling to new population segments, especially the tourists coming to the city. And at the time, what we had found was that many of the short-term users or the tourists said they were riding Cabby because they saw it. So they saw the red bikes all around and they said, oh, I want to do that as well. And that's why they joined or why they participated. The second study I want to highlight here is one on shared mobility devices. This is from 2019, and you see the names of the students there. I couldn't find a picture in Arlington County. And 2019, early 2019, e-scooters were still a new thing. So since 2017, private companies had been operating fleets of free-floating pedal bikes, and electric scooters for short-term rental in localities across the US. They are known as shared mobility devices. And then in September 2018, Arlington County started a 9-month pilot program that allowed private companies to operate these in the county. And the research focus for the students then was to analyze demographics, socioeconomics, and trip purpose for the e-scooter users and assess the parked e-scooters and their impacts on sidewalks and streets. There was, maybe I should say there has been, there still is, a lot of complaints about e-scooters being sort of littering the sidewalks and blocking people's passage. So that we're looking at that. And then looking on the safety perception of the e-scooters among users and non-users, so riders of e-scooters and non-riders of e-scooters. How did the students do it? They designed a survey, an online survey, who they distributed to e-scooter riders and non-riders who live, work, or visit Roslyn. So it's limited to the Roslyn area, this part of study. The survey focused on demographics and was open for about 2 to 3 weeks. And it was distributed online through Virginia Tech, but also through the Roslyn bid, and participants could win a Visa gift card. The second part was an observational study. Here, the students were interested in figuring out how were e-scooters parked throughout Arlington. And we looked at Crystal City, Roslyn, and Courthouse. And in each area, we identified a stretch of 1 mile length, and the students walked this mile several days and several times of day. So let's say in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening, because parking may change over the time of day. And we did that during the week, and we did that on weekends to sort of get a little bit at the variability of that. So we had the survey, and we had this observational study and then the students had coded, we had to figure out, how do you measure poor parking? Like a scooter is poorly parked when you see it, you know it, but that wasn't good enough. So we had to identify what actually makes a poorly parked scooter, or how can that be identified. And I'll show you later what our categories were for that. So the first thing from the survey was, that I want to highlight here is we asked, so if a dockless e-scooter had not been available for your last trip on e-scooters in Roslyn, how would you have made that trip? So that's mode replacement. And we see here about a third said walking, and that's relatively low actually. In other surveys that have come after this, we saw even higher shares of walking. About 40% said they would have taken a taxi, Uber, or Lyft. So from a sustainability perspective, that's a big gain if people are shifting from gas-powered automobiles to electric scooters. And then you can see the smaller categories here. So shifting from bus, shifting from dockless bikes, shifting from Capital Bikeshare or from personal bikes. So there's about 12% or so shifting from other dockless bikes or personal bikes. Small percentage up here, the 4% say they would have driven a motor vehicle. And on the upper left here, 3% say it's a new trip. So there's some induced demand by just having the e-scooters around. Then we wanted to figure out, where do e-scooter riders actually want to ride? And the question was, regardless of where you ride, rank where you would prefer to ride dockless e-scooters in Roslyn. And there was a scale from 1 to 5. And so an average score that's higher to 5 means it's more attractive. So protected bike lanes, for example, there was one on Wilson Boulevard at 1. So the e-scooter riders want to ride on protected bike lanes, or on not protected bike lanes in the street, or on trails. And then come sidewalks, and the shared travel lane with cars was sort of the lowest. And this is an interesting finding, and we corroborated that in a different study. So even e-scooter riders who ride on sidewalks actually do not prefer riding on sidewalks. They often prefer riding on protected bike lanes or other protected lanes that are away from pedestrians, but they're not available in many places. This one here was interesting. It's about perceived safety. And the question is, and the answer is broken out in 2 different categories. As a pedestrian in Roslyn, how safe do you feel around riders on dockless e-scooters? You see very different responses on the left and the right. On the left are people that have not ridden electric scooters. And what you can see there is 38% feel very unsafe around them. 38% feel unsafe. So almost 80% do not feel safe walking around e-scooters. And these are people who haven't ridden e-scooters. Very different picture on the right. These are the people who have ridden e-scooters before. We are only around a quarter, so 5% and 19% say that they are not feeling safe around e-scooters. So there's a big difference. We had the same question, and I don't have the results here, where we asked, as a driver in Roslyn, how safe do you feel driving around dockless e-scooters? And we had similar answer patterns. So those who haven't ridden e-scooters felt not safe driving around the e-scooters versus those who knew rode e-scooters felt safe driving around them. And then this also quite interesting in terms of perception. We asked, how often do you, as a pedestrian in Roslyn, encounter blocked sidewalks due to improperly parked dockless e-scooters? On the left now we have the scooter users. Only 7% that said that they always see improperly parked e-scooters. Another 14% said often they saw them. But then look at the middle bar. These are non-users. 33% of the non-users say they always see poorly parked e-scooters, and 42% say they often see poorly parked e-scooters. So again, huge differences in perception of likely the same thing between users and non-users of e-scooters. Now to the second part of the study, where the students actually looked at e-scooters and tried to figure out how they are parked. And what we found is, looking at around 607 or so e-scooters over time, we found that 84% were actually properly parked and 16% were improperly parked. So this seems to be much lower than what some of the perceptions suggest. It was actually corroborated by a later study looking at in Georgetown and some other places in the US, but also in Australia. What they found was that in Georgetown in particular, that the e-scooters were actually parked more likely properly than cars. So they found a lot of cars parking in the second row, or parking in where they shouldn't park. So cars were actually parked more poorly in Georgetown than they were parked than the e-scooters were parked. But so now back to Roslyn. So what is improper parking? And this is sort of how we had defined improper parking. So and you see how often this improper parking occurred. So if an e-scooter was obstructing a bike share station access, it was improperly parked. If it was blocking a vehicle right-of-way, if it was obstructing a bus stop, if it was damaging trees or plants, and that really meant if they were leaned against trees or plants, if they were obstructing fire hydrants or valve access, if they were obstructing street furniture, like if they were in front of a bench, for example, if they were on private property, they're not supposed to be on private property. If they blocked the pedestrian right-of-way, or, and that's most often what happened, they were not upright, so they had fallen over, or somebody had thrown them down. We don't know if there's wind; they may also fall over, but they were lying down. So this is what e-scooter parking looked like in Roslyn. So here's what the students then concluded. Scooters are a practical choice for users, and they recommended for the county to create safer places to ride, non-automotive forms of transportation. We had found that scooters replaced more TNC and taxi trips than transit trips, so they should encourage more of the e-scooters also near transit stations. The perception of e-scooter safety and parking impacts vary sharply between users and non-users. We looked at these graphs just a minute ago, and the recommendation then was to conduct further outreach to non-users on scooter rules and safety. One of the points here may also be that maybe some of the non-users don't really know what a properly parked scooter is or what it looks like, and they consider a scooter that would be, by the rules and regulations, be parked properly. Maybe they still consider that to be improperly parked, so there may be a different perception. The most frequent types of improper parking were e-scooters that were not upright, blocking the pedestrian right-of-way or on private property. We suggested at the time to maybe consider designing better kickstands that they don't fall over, and to require maybe lock-to requirements. And I think the district has done that since then. And then the last one, and I hadn't presented on that, but it's quite interesting. The respondents were generally unfamiliar with the rules. So what we had done there is in our survey, we had a question and said, here's a whole list of things. Please click which of those is a rule for e-scooters in Arlington County. And neither the riders nor the non-riders really knew what the rules are for e-scooters. They clicked all sorts of things, but nobody really knew what the rules are. My guess is that hasn't really that much improved. People just think this is right or this is wrong. So what we recommended there was more education and outreach to current and potential e-scooter users in Arlington. And now this already brings me to the last slide here, which is just an overview of, with these QR links there in the back. These are academically peer-reviewed papers that came out of all of these 3 studies. So it's not just that the students did cutting-edge research that provided information to Capital Bikeshare, or provided information to DDOT, provided information to Arlington County. We were also then later able to take that and turn it into an academically peer-reviewed paper. The 2 bottom ones are behind a paywall, as is often the case with academic stuff. If you really want the paper, you can send me an email. The first one there on top is open access, so you can access that directly on the e-scooters in Roslyn. With that, I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions, or maybe we can have a discussion. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ralph, for both of your presentations. I do see one question that was submitted in the chat regarding your first presentation on bike shares. It's from Mohammed Riza, who asked that, are the bikes regular e-bike or are they a mix?
So at the time, there were no e-bikes in the Capital Bikeshare fleet yet, so they were all regular bikes. The privately owned bikes, so the regular riders, that was the Regional Household Travel Survey from 2008. And my guess is, and it didn't exist as a variable, my guess is there were very few e-bikes, if any, in that sample as well. It's just the e-bikes really took off maybe in the last 5 to 10 years, and not much before that. Probably even the last 5 years.
And I do have a follow-up question based on the time of the original study, and obviously, given that we've navigated COVID-19, I just want to ask your thoughts on what you think the Bikeshare has expanded in that time period to where it is now. Do you feel like the numbers that represented from 10 years ago have exponentially changed, or?
Yeah, I mean, so the system has changed quite a bit. The system has expanded greatly. It has come to many different places. It has come to Alexandria. It has come out all the way to Tyson's I think it has come to places in Maryland as well. The number of bikes has increased. The electric bikes we have has increased. And I'm not following it that closely, but the headlines I'm seeing pointing to a very positive trend for Capital Bikeshare. That's not a given. Like many bike share systems actually closed for COVID and never opened again. So it's not a given that you're doing great after COVID. Some of the systems were just killed by COVID, depending on how their operating was financed and how their systems worked. The systems that were successful during COVID we did a separate study on COVID and bicycling, and so it's based on that. What I'm talking about now is some systems really doubled down to use bike share as a means for essential workers. So they had special credit or especially low membership rates for essential workers to actually get to work, who didn't want to ride a bus, because in a bus you have to share the space with someone who may carry the disease. Many other systems also started really changing their fleet over and increasing the electric bike number in their fleet. Some systems even switching entirely to electric bikes. Other systems used the COVID pandemic to actually expand the system. They put in more stations, they put in more, and then yet other cities actually expanded the bikeways considerably during COVID. So they used the time when nobody was out to actually put in new bike facilities. And these cities, in our review of studies, and I can send you a link or maybe drop it later, these cities really showed great success in bike share coming back. And from all I can gather from reading the headlines, Capital Bikeshare seems to be one of them.
Yeah, and I think the number of e-bikes have completely exploded since they started. I think maybe 2020. They may have started just before COVID. The e-bikes in the DC area. We do have another question from Lucy. Are e-bikes and scooter shares used for delivery services in the DC area? And then do you foresee that taking off more in the future?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know about it. I mean, what you always see or have in mind is immediately New York City, of course, with all the e-bikes and things being used for deliveries. And they're also with problems and required new regulations, because a lot of these delivery e-bikes or delivery vehicles had very cheap batteries that then, I don't know if you saw that in the news, caused fires as well in New York, and sort of caused a lot of heartache on how to deal with those. I'm not aware how it works in DC. I haven't seen any studies. Maybe somebody else here on the call knows more about that. My guess is they would be used for that, but I honestly don't know.
Next question from Mohammed Riza, who asks, based on your experience, is it practical to separate research on regular bikes from e-bikes? And the second part is it practical to identify the two types in automated counting, such as video counting? And then is there any benefit in the separation of regular bikes from e-bikes?
I mean, what I've seen in the research is that regular bikes and e-bikes are different in a couple of aspects. One difference is in the users. So on e-bikes, and that's mainly on research based in Europe, but I think there are also some studies in the US, initially got really picked up by seniors. So older individuals who either rode a bike during their previous lifetime and now wanted a little extra boost, or didn't feel comfortable riding the whole distance on their normal bike, that they wanted an e-bike. So there was a difference in who rode the e-bikes versus who is riding bikes. So I think that makes it useful to separate the two if you can get a large enough sample size. The second difference was in the distance ridden, so longer distances with e-bikes, as you would expect, because you have the motor. The third difference is, and to look at different studies there, is the speed. So e-bikes are on average surprisingly small, slightly faster in their total travel speed. However, I haven't seen good studies on that. They are much faster on individual segments because they can reach a higher top speed. However, the average speed throughout an entire trip, because you stop at stoplights, you stop at intersections, and that brings down the average speed of the e-bike quite a bit. Sometimes when you're riding on a bike, an e-bike overtakes you at the next traffic light, you're catching up with them. So your travel time is essentially is the same. But still, they're a little bit faster. I think a study from Norway found that regular cyclists were 15 kilometers per hour, and the e-bikes were 18 kilometers per hour on average. So relatively similar. But still, I would keep them separate. The other question is then to keep them separate is figuring out where e-bikes go. And then there's a big debate around, with e-bikes, especially cargo e-bikes, do we need to adapt our infrastructure? Do we need different bikeway infrastructure? If you have cargo bikes or cargo e-bikes, you may need wider bike lanes, especially in curves or at narrow passages. You may have to think about different turning radii. You may have to think about different widths of the infrastructure. What yet others suggest, because of the speed differential on individual segments, is maybe we need wider bike lanes with an overtaking lane and a slower lane. That's if we have really a lot of cycling. So I think a lot speaks for keeping them separate, at least at the moment, to explore where they go, how many of them we are, if they're taking over, etc. Last point on this is there's, of course, a big debate about the different types of e-bikes and how they are regulated. So we have e-bikes that go, I think, around, I always get confused with the kilometers and miles, 20 miles per hour. That's 30 kilometers per hour. And then we have the faster e-bikes that can go up to almost 28 miles per hour. And the question then is, of course, how are they regulated? Are they both bicycles? Is one of them more a moped, or is it not? And there are differences of opinion on those as well. And then the last one is there are also e-bikes, of course, that only have a throttle, like you don't pedal. And then the question is, what are they? Are they bicycles? Are they mopeds? How do we regulate them? Where are they allowed to go? Where they are not allowed to go? But that's a whole different story.
Thank you so much for those responses. We've got two more questions I see in the chat. Alvaro asks, were these studies or papers shared with Arlington County and DDOT for further consideration?
Yeah, so the e-scooter study we presented to a working group at Arlington County at the time, because it was a pilot project still, and they were sort of trying to figure out what to do with these e-scooters. The bike share study we presented to representatives of DDOT, Arlington County actually as well, even though we didn't study Arlington County, and CABI and Capital Bikeshare on those. And the same with the study from John Wergen's study was shared with DDOT, and I think they shared it then with Capital Bikeshare.
One additional question from Jasmine, and Jasmine asks, what are some good strategies or suggestions to prevent scooters from blocking the sidewalks?
Wow, that's the question, right? There was an article by a researcher from Cornell University called Nick Klein, together with co-researchers, and I forget their names now, but and they looked at the sort of clutter and how to avoid the clutter. And I think there are a couple of options. One is what the district tries to do with these lock to requirements. So you can only lock your e-scooter if it's attached to something. You have to take a picture, and the picture has to detect that it's locked to something. The question, of course, there is, what is it locked to? Is it good enough to be locked to a bench? Maybe it blocks a bench. Can it be locked to bike parking? But then it blocks bike parking for bikes that may want to use it. Another idea is to use geofencing, so only allow e-scooters to be locked in certain areas, so geofenced areas. The problem there is, especially in cities, if you have these, I think they call them urban canyons, like where the GPS signal is not very good because you have high buildings on either side, and so it's very hard to actually do the geofencing on that. I think the geofencing has a lot going for it. The lock to, I'm a little bit suspicious if they are locked to things they shouldn't be locked to, like what I said, benches or bike parking. Like if you arrive somewhere with a bicycle and everything is taken up by parked e-scooters and you can't lock your bike anywhere, that's really a bad a bad outcome. But I think the solution would be in the technology and not allowing users to lock their vehicles if they are not parked properly. There may be other ideas, but these are the ones I know of.
I'd also like to add to that part of that process as enthusiasts of bicycling and scootering, if you see something, make the change. I can tell you a few times, just you see it on the sidewalk, move it out of the way, particularly for those who are visually impaired. It's a small part we can all do on our end as well to, if we see something, make a change. And education's the best way. Somebody sees that and they're like, hey, maybe I should do that next time I come across a scooter that's in the middle of the sidewalk.
Yeah, and can I make one more point? This is a little bit more controversial, but maybe we can end on that. Is like, and I agree, and we have to be, the scooter users have to be mindful, and the scooters have to be out of the way, and they can't block people's walking paths. But that's why this study that I mentioned before of Georgetown is so important. We've gotten so used to poor car parking, and we're accepting poor car parking. So maybe if we enforced car parking a little bit better, or maybe made some more space on the roadway, maybe we could have the scooters actually stored more where we currently store automobiles. I know this is controversial, but it's a great cartoon or online meme, and it's sort of two people walking through a parking lot, and there are cars everywhere, and then there are two scooters next to them, and they complain about the scooters, but they don't see the automobile anymore because we have gotten so used to it. I know this is very controversial, so maybe it's good to mention it at the end, so we can move on from that.
And I think we just have one quick question. I know we're running close to the end of our hour, but I did see Vicky put her hand up. If you had a question, Vicky. You're on mute if you're trying to talk, Vicky.
Okay. Oh, sorry about that. And yeah, mine is like a sidewalk related. And by the way, good to see you, Dr. Buehler. Feel like we're in the class right now. Also good to see Jason as well. And so I just want to give you some perspective from me as an e-scooter rider and why I don't want to ride on sidewalk. First, the sidewalks are really bumpy. A lot of time they're not well maintained, and the pavement material chosen for sidewalk is not that smooth compared with the roadway. And there are a lot of time with the concrete slab, just from the weather and the kind of bump it up, it's really bumpy. I rode that before, my hands are shaking at the end from my hour ride. And also there's some low-hanging tree all the time, doesn't get cut. So kind of, if you're not careful, it will hit your head. And then also there's the ramps at the intersection. You have to go on and off, very difficult to ride on those little curb to go up with your little tiny wheel from the scooter. And also just riding on the road is more smooth. And also I think nowadays the scooter can get up to the speed 19 miles per hour, somewhere even higher, like 20 miles. And so those are not very suitable for riding on the sidewalk and more suitable on the road. So just my feedback for you, why?
Yeah, and that gets to a really important question. That's sort of the coexistence of bicycles, e-scooters, and pedestrians. And while e-scooters and bikes are really endangered by cars when in the roadway, they can become a very big nuisance for pedestrians if they are not careful on shared use trails and on sidewalks. So I think it's quite crucial to provide infrastructure for all of them for a peaceful and a productive coexistence, because they are all great modes that we need to become more sustainable.
Agree. Thank you.
All right. Well, just want to thank everyone who attended, and especially our presenters, Jason and Professor Buehler. Thank you for your time. Again, this meeting is recorded, so we'll be uploading to our YouTube page and providing the links to those presentation slides with the QR codes as well. We're at a virtual meeting today, but if you follow our website at capsite.org, we're back to in-person technical meetings for April and May, with April with Montgomery County technical meeting in April 24th, and a technical meeting at Audi Field, the soccer stadium, in May 15th. And further along, we'll be doing an actual bike tour in DC, just along separated production facilities and just a lot of infrastructure where our members have worked on. So again, thank you for everyone's time, and thank you for our presenters. Have a good rest of your day.